Welcome back to the channel, folks, where we dive into the wild, wonderful world of men transforming into women in all kinds of fascinating ways. If that's your vibe, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Now let's jump right into today's story. Emma's eyes fluttered open slowly, the light from the morning sun filtering in through the curtains, soft and golden. Her vision was blurry at first, shapes and color bleeding together like a watercolor painting. But gradually, things began to sharpen. Consciousness returned like waves lapping at the shore, gentle at first, then with growing insistence. Each breath brought more clarity, more awareness, pulling her further from the fog of her transformation-induced sleep. "Where am I?" was her first coherent thought, followed immediately by a more pressing question. Who am I now? The first thing she saw was Claire, sitting at the edge of the bed, eyes wide with relief and something like joy. Claire's face came into focus, familiar features, watchful eyes, slightly disheveled hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from prolonged worry, but her expression was brightening by the second as she registered Emma's return to consciousness. "Emma," Claire breathed, leaning in. "Are you with us?" The sound of her name, her new name, helped anchor her. Yes, she was Emma now. Not Michael. Emma. Da. The name felt right in a way that surprised her, as if her mind had adjusted to this new identity during her days of unconsciousness. Emma tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat, dry and unused after days of silence. She gave a small nod instead, her lips parting in confusion as she looked around, then down at herself. Even that small movement felt different. The way her neck curved, the weight of her head, the cascade of blonde hair that fell forward with the motion. Everything had a new center of gravity, a different balance. Claire didn't waste a second. She bolted up from the bedside and called out, loud and clear, "John, she's awake." Her voice echoed through the house like a starter's pistol, sharp and urgent against the morning quiet. The sound made Emma flinch slightly, her senses still adjusting to being awake. Everything seemed amplified, the sunlight too bright, Claire's voice too loud, the sheets against her skin too textured. Emma blinked slowly, groggy and disoriented, her limbs heavy. She felt like she'd just slept through a hurricane. Her body ached in the strangest way, as if it had been rewritten cell by cell, again. And it had been. She could feel the differences without even looking, an altered weight distribution, new sensations where there had been none before, a profound shift in how she occupied space. What happened to me this time? She wondered, though she already knew the answer. Phase 2, the development of full secondary sexual characteristics. The transformation from androgynous to unmistakably female. She shifted beneath the sheets, propping herself up slowly, and immediately noticed. Everything was different. Her chest felt heavier, not in a burdensome way, but in a way that was undeniably present. Two soft weights that moved with her, responding to gravity, to her breathing, to every slight adjustment of her posture. She looked down, and her breath caught. Full, perky breasts rose and fell beneath the soft fabric of her nightshirt, perfectly shaped, firm but natural. Oh my God, she thought, stunned despite having intellectually expected this change. Expecting something and experiencing it were worlds apart. These weren't the initial buds that had begun forming before phase 2. These were complete, developed breasts, the kind that would draw eyes, that would require support, that unmistakably marked her as female. Her hands instinctively came up, brushing over them lightly. Sensitive. Soft. Real. The sensation was startling, a jolt of awareness as her fingers registered the new sensitivity of these tissues. Even through the fabric of her nightshirt, the light touch sent unexpected tingles through her body. "Well?" she managed to croak, her voice higher and softer than she remembered. "These are new." Claire let out a small laugh, relief evident in her expression. "And they look great on you. Perfect proportion to your frame." "Thanks. I grew them myself," Emma replied with unexpected humor, surprising herself with the quip. "Apparently, while I was unconscious." Talk about efficiency. She swallowed hard, her heart beating faster as she sat up a little straighter. That's when she felt it. Beneath her. The fullness of her butt, pressing into the mattress. It wasn't subtle. Her hips had widened, her thighs had thickened, and her backside had taken on a plush, rounded shape that made sitting feel different. "I have an ass now," she thought with mild amazement. A real honest-to-goodness female behind. It was like sitting on a built-in cushion, a strange sensation for someone who had spent decades with the relatively flat masculine posterior she'd been born with. Everything felt different. Her waist was narrower, creating a more pronounced hourglass figure that she could feel even without seeing it. Her limbs looked longer, smoother, more graceful. Even her fingers looked more delicate. The nails slightly longer, the joints less pronounced. She ran her hands down her sides, feeling the dramatic curve from ribs to waist to hips, a silhouette that was quintessentially feminine, unmistakably womanly. "I'm shaped like an hourglass now," she thought, still processing the extent of the changes. Like one of those vintage pin-ups. But still, there was one piece that hadn't changed. She could feel it. The last remnant of Michael. As she shifted her position, she became aware of its presence, diminished, certainly, but still there. Smaller now, barely there by comparison, but still unmistakably male. The final frontier. She thought with a mix of emotions too complex to immediately identify. The last piece of the puzzle. She didn't dwell on it too long. She knew phase 3 was coming. One more week. That's when the final change would come, the one that would make this transformation complete. Dr. Langford had explained it clinically. The final reshaping of her reproductive organs, the completion of her metamorphosis from male to female. The last vestige of Michael transformed into the final piece of Emma. But not yet. And honestly, so she didn't want to think about that now. She was awake. She was alive. And she was herself. Despite the profound physical changes, she still felt like herself inside, her thoughts, her memories, her sense of humor, all intact. The container had changed dramatically, but the contents remained essentially the same. Still me, she thought with surprising clarity. Just wrapped in a completely different package. Claire sat back down beside her, watching her with a mixture of pride and gentle concern. "Take it slow," she said softly. "You've been out for almost 3 days. 3 days, Emma echoed, genuinely surprised. It felt like minutes. Her voice still startled her, higher, more melodious, with a breathy quality that hadn't been there before. Even her speech patterns seemed altered, the pace slightly different, the cadence changed. Emma nodded, still trying to process everything. "I feel weird," she muttered, her voice breathy and softer now. "But also good. Different. Really different." "Different good or different bad?" Claire asked, her head tilting slightly with the question. Emma considered this, running her hands over the curves of her hips again, feeling the substantial weight of her breasts, the narrowness of her waist. "Different amazing, actually," she admitted, surprising herself with the candor. "Like I've been upgraded to a luxury model, after driving a standard one my whole life." Claire laughed, the sound bright with relief. "That's one way to look at it. Though I wouldn't describe Michael as standard exactly." Basic model with some nice features, Emma amended with a small smile. This is definitely the deluxe package, though. She tried to sit up further and was surprised by how her newly curved body moved. The way her breasts shifted with the motion, the way her waist bent, the way her hips pressed into the mattress. It's like learning to drive all over again, she commented, adjusting her position. Same basic principles, but the handling is completely different. Before Claire could reply, the bedroom door swung open. John stood there, slightly out of breath, his eyes darting between the two of them. He froze. His expression was a study in contrasts, shock, recognition, confusion, and something harder to define. His eyes widened as they took in Emma's transformed figure, clearly visible even beneath the light blanket. Emma looked up at him, sitting upright in bed, her new form unmistakable, so close to Claire's now that it was like staring at her younger sister. "Hi, John," she said, suddenly self-conscious under his stunned gaze. "Miss me?" Her attempt at levity fell flat in the face of his astonishment. She couldn't blame him. The Emma he'd last seen, conscious, was still relatively androgynous, slender, yes, feminine in feature, but lacking the pronounced curves that now defined her figure. This version of her was unmistakably, undeniably female, from the fullness of her breast to the curve of her hips, to the softened features of her face. John's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I think we broke him," Emma Stage whispered to Claire, finding humor the easiest way to diffuse the tension of the moment. "You can't really blame him," Claire replied, with a small smile. "It's not every day your friend goes to sleep looking one way, and wakes up looking like, well, this." She gestured to Emma's dramatically altered figure. John finally seemed to find his voice, though it came out slightly strained. "I knew the changes would be significant, but seeing it is a lot," Emma supplied. "Different," John finished, echoing Emma's own assessment. "Really different." Claire gave him a smile. "She's back. And then some," John added, a hint of his usual humor returning as the initial shock began to fade. "Looks like phase 2 was thorough." "Apparently my body is an overachiever," Emma replied, glancing down at her new curves. "Going above and beyond the call of duty." "Dr. Langford said your transformation was proceeding more rapidly than expected," Claire explained. "Your body seems particularly receptive to the genetic modifications." "Lucky me," Emma said, though there was no sarcasm in her tone. Despite the strangeness of it all, she couldn't deny a certain fascination with her new form. The smoothness of her skin, the softness of her curves, the delicacy of her features. And for a moment, the room was just filled with quiet awe. It was John who broke the silence, clearing his throat slightly. "So, how do you feel? Other than different, I mean." It was such a normal question, the kind you'd ask someone recovering from an illness or surgery, that it somehow made the extraordinary circumstances seem more manageable. "Hungry, actually," Emma replied, suddenly aware of the hollow feeling in her stomach. "Starving, in fact. Apparently completely remodeling your body works up an appetite." "I'll make breakfast," John offered immediately, seemingly relieved to have a practical task to focus on. "Anything specific you want?" "Everything," Emma said with feeling. "My stomach thinks my throat's been cut. I feel like I could eat an entire grocery store." "Transformation requires enormous calories," Claire explained. "Your body's been working non-stop for 3 days, rebuilding itself according to new specifications. It's no wonder you're hungry." "Pancakes it is," John decided, backing toward the door. "With eggs, bacon, toast, basically everything we have in the kitchen." "My hero," Emma called after him, as he disappeared into the hallway, clearly eager for a moment to process everything he'd just seen. With John gone, Claire turned back to Emma, her expression softening. You really are okay? This is a lot to wake up to. Emma considered the question seriously, taking a moment to truly check in with herself. Beyond the physical changes, beyond the shock and adjustment, how did she really feel? I'm okay, she said finally, and was surprised to discover it was true. Better than okay, actually. It's strange, but it feels right somehow. Like my body finally matches something. I don't know how to explain it. Claire nodded, understanding in her eyes. You don't have to explain it. Just know that whatever you're feeling, confusion, excitement, apprehension, it's all normal. There's no rulebook for what you're going through. Good thing, Emma replied with a small smile. Because I'd probably be breaking all the rules anyway. She shifted again, still adjusting to the new sensations of her transformed body. So, what happens now? Now, Claire echoed. Now you eat, rest, and start getting used to your new form. And when you're ready, which doesn't have to be today, we start the practical education. How to dress for these curves, how to move with this new center of gravity, how to manage all the logistics of a female body. Logistics, Emma repeated with a raised eyebrow. That sounds ominously vague. Trust me, Claire said, with a knowing smile. There's a reason women's restroom lines are always longer than men's. Female bodies come with a whole instruction manual of maintenance requirements. Great, Emma said dryly. Can't wait for that particular lesson. But despite her sarcasm, she couldn't deny a certain curiosity, a desire to understand this new body she inhabited, to master its movements, to learn its capabilities and limitations. One step at a time, Claire reassured her, patting her hand gently. For now, just focus on getting your strength back. The rest will come. Emma nodded, settling back against the pillows, still marveling at the way her body moved, the way it felt, both foreign and increasingly familiar. One more week until Phase 3. The final transformation. But for now, this was enough to process, this dramatic reshaping of her physical form, this emergence into full femininity. One step at a time, indeed. Emma made her way down the stairs slowly, bare feet pressing against the hardwood floor, one hand gripping the railing for balance. The silk robe Claire had draped over her earlier was loosely tied at the waist, swaying with each cautious step, revealing the hem of her sleep shirt underneath. Each stair presented a new challenge, a recalculation of balance and weight. Her center of gravity had shifted dramatically, lower, more anchored in her hips rather than her chest, as it had been when she was Michael. It made descending stairs a conscious exercise in coordination, rather than the automatic motion it had once been. Like walking on a ship in gentle waves, she thought, feeling the natural sway of her hips with each step. Everything's moving, but somehow still stable. Everything moved differently now. Her hips swayed with a natural rhythm she wasn't consciously controlling, and the gentle bounce of her breasts beneath the soft fabric was still something her brain hadn't caught up with yet. Each step produced a slight, unfamiliar movement across her chest, nothing dramatic, but impossible to ignore. Well, this is new, she murmured to herself, pausing halfway down the stairs to adjust the belt of her robe. No wonder women are always adjusting their bras. These things have a mind of their own. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, at the bottom of the stairs, and almost did a double take. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, and yet achingly familiar. Claire's features rendered in a slightly younger form, with the same golden hair, the same delicate bone structure, but fresher somehow, less marked by time and experience. She felt softer, fuller, as if her body was now sculpted from something smoother, more fluid than it had been before. Every curve, every shift of weight was unfamiliar. Where Michael's body had been angles and planes, Emma's was arcs and swells. The hard edges had been rounded, the sharp corners smoothed away, leaving something that felt both more vulnerable and somehow more complete. And yet, not unpleasant. That was, perhaps, the most surprising part. Despite the strangeness, despite the disorientation of inhabiting this dramatically altered form, there was an unexpected comfort to it, as if her body had settled into a more natural state, like a puzzle piece that had finally found its proper place. Careful, on those last steps, Claire called from somewhere in the kitchen, her voice carrying through the house. "Your balance is going to be off for a few days." "Thanks for the warning," Emma called back, gripping the railing a bit more firmly as she navigated the final steps. "Though a bit late since I'm already halfway down." "No, just looking out for you," came Claire's cheerful reply. "Wouldn't want your first day with your new curves to end with a trip to the emergency room." As she stepped into the kitchen, she caught John sitting at the table, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up as she entered, and for a second, his eyes lingered. Too long. Not in a leering way. Not crude. But different. It wasn't the look of a guy seeing his old friend walk into the room. It was something more complicated, recognition mixed with appreciation, familiarity tangled with something new and undefined. Emma felt a strange flutter in her stomach, a sensation she couldn't immediately identify. Was it discomfort, flattery, something else entirely? The emotional landscape of this new body seemed as altered as its physical topography. "Well, this is awkward," she thought, suddenly aware of how the silk robe clung to her new curves. That's definitely not the same look he gave Michael. His eyes met hers, and he quickly gave her a small smile, clearing his throat and gesturing to the chair across from him. "Morning," he said. "Or whatever time it is for you." There was a slight awkwardness to his tone, as if he too was navigating unfamiliar territory. The strange new dynamic between them, now that Emma's transformation had progressed to this unmistakably female form. Emma gave a soft, sleepy chuckle and sat down carefully, adjusting the robe around her thighs. "Feels like I've slept for a year." The simple act of sitting required a new awareness of her body, the way her fuller backside met the chair, the way her thighs pressed together, the way her breasts shifted slightly as she leaned forward. Nothing dramatic, but 1,000 tiny adjustments her muscles were learning to make automatically. 3 days, John corrected, his eyes now firmly fixed on his phone. "Though I guess that's close enough to a year in transformation time." "Time flies when you're busy growing breasts and hips," Emma quipped, then watched with mild amusement as John's ears reddened slightly. Claire appeared a moment later, holding a steaming mug and placing it in front of her. "Figured you'd want coffee," she said, then turned and headed toward the kitchen. "I'm making us something light. Don't wander off." "As if I could wander far," Emma replied. "I'm still getting used to operating this new equipment. Advanced walking maneuvers are at least a day away." Claire laughed from the kitchen. "You're doing better than I expected, actually. Most people would still be upstairs, too overwhelmed to even attempt the stairs." "Most people haven't had the benefit of your expert coaching," Emma replied, adjusting her position in the chair, still trying to find a comfortable way to sit with her new curves. Emma reached for the mug and took a sip, only to blink in surprise. It was sweet and creamy, with just enough bitterness to balance it out. Nothing like the strong black coffee she preferred for decades. "That's unexpected," she thought, staring down at the pale brown liquid. "It's like my taste buds have been completely rewired too." She took another sip, frowning thoughtfully. "Wait, this is how you take your coffee," she called out to Claire. "Yup," Claire answered from the kitchen, her voice cheerful. "Makes sense, right? You're basically me now. Taste buds and all. Your body knows what it likes. So I've inherited your coffee preferences along with your DNA," Emma asked, eyeing the mug with a mixture of fascination and mild dismay. Where does the biological influence end and personal choice begin? That's a philosophical question well beyond my pay grade, Claire replied, the sound of something sizzling accompanying her words. All I know is that your sensory receptors are now genetically identical to mine, so it makes sense that you'd process flavors the same way. Emma blinked down at the mug. She used to drink her coffee black, no sugar, no nonsense. Michael's coffee, strong, bitter, uncompromising, a reflection of a more straightforward, less nuanced approach to sensory experiences. But now, she took another sip. Yeah, this was definitely better. The complexity of flavors, the interplay of bitter and sweet, the smoothness of the cream. It was like experiencing coffee in high definition after years of basic cable. I feel like I should be insulted that my body's betraying my long-standing coffee principles, she said, taking another appreciative sip. But this is actually really good. Welcome to the sweet side, Claire called from the kitchen. We have cookies too. She leaned back in her chair, letting the robe fall slightly off her shoulder, feeling the cool air brush against her smooth skin. The sensation was intensely pleasurable. Another new development. Her skin seemed to register every subtle shift in temperature, every whisper of air movement, with an acuity that was almost overwhelming. It's like trading in an old flip phone for the latest smartphone, she thought, running her fingers along her collarbone. Same basic function, but with dramatically upgraded sensory capabilities. With Claire busy in the kitchen and John back to scrolling his phone. Though she could tell he was still very aware of her presence, Emma finally let herself take stock. Her hands moved absently, trailing over her new shape. Her hips, now wider and spreading against the seat of the chair. Her thighs, softer and pressed together, her waist narrower and contoured in a way that almost seemed artificial in its perfection. It was like exploring a foreign landscape, familiar in theory, but utterly new in practice. The soft curve, where waist met hip. The gentle swell of her thighs, the unexpected narrowness of her wrists. All pieces of a new physical identity she was still learning to inhabit. And her chest, full, firm, and resting naturally under the silk and cotton. That was perhaps the most dramatic change, the presence of breasts where there had been none before. Not the initial buds of her first transformation, but fully developed, perfectly proportioned breasts that changed how she moved, how she breathed, how fabric felt against her skin. They're actually quite nice, she thought with a surprising lack of self-consciousness. Perfect size for my frame. Not too large, not too small. Just right. She shifted, crossing one leg over the other, and felt the gentle pull of her backside shifting beneath her. Curved. Plush. Real. The motion caused a ripple effect through her transformed body. Breasts adjusting, hips settling, the robe sliding slightly against her smooth skin. Everything's connected, she realized. One movement creates a chain reaction throughout the entire system. It was surreal, and so very real. She caught John stealing another glance, his eyes quickly returning to his phone when he realized she'd noticed. Something on your mind, John? She asked, unable to resist the opening. He looked up, a flush creeping up his neck. Just getting used to it, he admitted after a moment's hesitation. You look so much like Claire now. But different. Younger. It's a bit disorienting. Imagine how I feel, Emma replied with a wry smile. At least you're looking at the changes from the outside. I'm experiencing them from within. Fair point, John conceded. I guess we're all adjusting. Some more dramatically than others, Claire chimed in, appearing with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. She set it down in front of Emma with a flourish. You need to refuel after all that biological reconstruction. What? She was Emma now. Not just in name, or in the way people treated her, but in a way that was undeniable. Her body had crossed a threshold from ambiguously feminine to unquestionably female. The slender, androgynous form of her initial transformation had blossomed into something lush, curved, unmistakably womanly. I would turn heads walking down the street, she realized with a mixture of amusement and mild alarm. Men would look at me the way John just did. It was a strange thought, being the object of male attention in that particular way. Not something Michael had ever experienced or considered. Phase 3 was still coming. There was one final piece left to change, but for now, she didn't want to think about it. That last vestige of Michael, that final remnant of her original biological sex, would soon be transformed as well. The thought was too complex, too loaded with implications. She wasn't ready to process while still adjusting to these current changes. One transformation at a time, she thought, picking up her fork and taking a bite of the eggs Claire had prepared. She sipped her coffee again, savoring the warmth, letting the morning light pour in across the kitchen floor. John glanced at her once more, then quickly away. She caught it again. That look. The look men give attractive women, a mixture of appreciation, interest, and automatic assessment. A look Michael had given countless women over the years, but had never received. Until now. Filed it away. And said nothing. But something shifted in the atmosphere of the kitchen, a subtle recalibration of the dynamics between the three of them. Nothing dramatic, nothing overt, but a quiet acknowledgement that their relationship had entered new, uncharted territory. Emma was no longer just Michael in a feminine form. No, she was becoming something, someone entirely unique. Neither wholly the man she had been, nor exactly the woman whose DNA she now carried. And that transformation was affecting all of them in ways none of them had fully anticipated.